I am a Cuauhteco. And more importantly, I am a native American citizen.
My family came during Escandon's expedition to Texas. That would have been the 1700s.
Two people, two different family histories. Both have personal reasons for caring about which stories are included in the plans for the Alamo's redevelopment.
We have to fix our our history. We can't let others speak on our behalf.
Raymond Hernandez is a tribal council member of the Tapilam Cuauhteca Nation.
Tapilam, which means people of this land. It was a uniting force for all the different familias that come from the missions to say, we belong. We are these people. We are Tapilam.
The different clans, including the Payaya, lived in what is now southern Texas and northeastern Mexico. In 2001, the city of San Antonio issued a proclamation recognizing Tapilam as the first tribal families of San Antonio. The Archdiocese of San Antonio recognized them as the indigenous tribal families of the 5 Indian missions of San Antonio.
That history is extremely important to us because we're living in it now. Mm-hmm. And that's our children and our grandchildren's legacy. Not to turn around and impose it as a way that this is it, this is the way it is, without acknowledging the contributions of other people. There's a story for a lot of people. There's a lot of room. What has happened over time is that we have been excluded from the history books and the educational system.
That exclusion is why Hernandez has fought to protect his ancestors.
I was raised by grandparents that held on to their native traditions, okay, to their culture, and never forgot where that like my grandfather says, estemos como el árbol del mezquite. Our roots are deep. And no matter how much they try to remove us, we come out bigger.
The Alamo served as a Catholic mission long before the battle. Hundreds of indigenous people are believed to have been buried at the site.
We were the first Catholics in Texas, here in San Antonio. And the thing about it is that our Catholic traditions at that time were to bury those that lived in and around the missions, to be buried at the misiones. Those are the Campos Santos.
That's why Tapilam wants a say in the restoration project. The group says those sacred cemeteries should be protected.
If you find them, let's move them respectfully. We want to protect, okay, our historical properties, and we want to protect those that contribute and make the Alamo what it is. And yes, like you have a memorial of all the defenders of the Alamo, right? Why is it not proper to have a memorial of the names of the people that we know are buried there or were buried there?
In December 2019, human remains were discovered in the Alamo Church. The remains haven't been identified.
Here we've got, you've got Anglos, you've got, Texians, you've got Hispanic, you've got Native American groups that have been around again for, in Texas, 13,000 years.
Martha Fleitas is the historian general of the Daughters of the Republic of Texas, the organization that served as Alamo custodians for more than 100 years. She doesn't have a connection to Tapilam, but she's sympathetic to the group.
I don't know enough about Indian or Native American history to say that I'm perfectly right, but I can understand the feeling of being left out. That is for sure. And we do know that that's a cemetery. I mean, that is a no-brainer.
Like all members of the DRT, Martha can trace her lineage back to her ancestors. They settled in Texas prior to when the state joined the U.S. at the end of 1845. The Daughters are dedicated to preserving the history of Texas, particularly before statehood and during the Republic. They have a huge collection of artifacts prized by Texas historians.
The signed copy of the Texas Declaration of Independence that Samuel Maverick signed. We have Santa Anna's pistols.
Martha agrees the history of the Alamo hasn't always been told accurately.
No, it hasn't. The main story is correct. I mean, they were there for 13 days. There was a siege, or 13-day siege.
One aspect of the Battle of the Alamo and the Texas Revolution that critics say gets glossed over, the role Tejanos, Texans of Mexican descent, played. Historians say Juan Seguin and Lorenzo de Zavala were as important to Texas independence as people like William B. Travis and Sam Houston.
When the outbreak of the Texas Revolution in 1935 started, many joined up. And the thing that people don't realize is that if you joined as a native Texan and the war didn't go your way, you have no home, because you can't stay. You can't go to Mexico because, well, you just fought against them, and going to the United States is a new place for you.
Their contributions were forgotten or left out altogether during the Jim Crow era in Texas, when minorities and people of color had little to no rights and their voices were silenced.
We saw the stories of Juan Seguin, who was betrayed by the white revolutionaries, downplayed.
After fighting on behalf of Texas during the Revolution, while serving as San Antonio mayor, Seguin was accused of treason and forced to flee to Mexico.
We like to hold up Lorenzo de Zavala, who was perhaps the most famous person in the Texas Revolution because of his previous role as vice president of Mexico. We've seen the betrayal of him and his betrayal and his experience completely rewritten to serve this Anglo-white supremacist myth.
Houston Chronicle columnist Chris Tomlinson says that after de Zavala helped draft the Constitution of the Republic of Texas and served as the Republic's first vice president, he realized he was a token to help Anglos recruit Tejanos and resigned in frustration. There were also important Tejanas, mothers, daughters, and wives who treated and cared for injured defenders. But all of these stories have been overshadowed by the myths. Martha thinks there is a bright side to Hollywood's interest. John Wayne and Billy Bob Thornton have played a role in getting a lot of people interested in the old mission.
I think most tourists come to see where Davy Crockett died. Do we stop at that? No. I think that's why they come. But I think we need to have a museum. We need to have docents. We need to have signage. People need to know that this was a mission. It was a mission. And who was here and what bands of Native Americans we were trying to Christianize.
There's a lot of battles that we can honor and tell. It doesn't just have to be one.
Now, a lot of people are hoping that whatever happens to the Alamo's redesign, it's more inclusive and tells a larger story than in the past.
And it's really important to show everybody's role in it. Whether you were native born or just arrived, it's important for people to know that this is a bigger story.
And by helping to paint an accurate picture of the past, the hope is it will impact the future.
That if you don't know the history that has gone before us, that you won't know for when it looks at us in the face again. We will repeat the same mistakes that we've made.